Hello and welcome to the program. In October, Ukraine, Russia, France and Germany are expected to meet in Paris in the framework of the Normandy Four summit to hammer out a peace deal to end a war that Russia started 5 years ago in Ukraine's Donbas. Earlier, Ukraine's representative to the Trilateral Contact Group at the Minsk talks, Leonid Kuchma, said it was up to the Normandy Four leaders to take an agreed decision on the so-called Steinmeier formula. To discuss this, we welcome to our studio today Petro Burkovskiy, analyst at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Hello and thank you for joining us. So first question. In general, what is Zelensky's plan to end the war in Donbas, and is there an alternative to the Normandy format in the thought and the mind of Zelensky's?
It seems to me that all we can see and judge from his first steps towards the peace resolution, the conflict resolution, peaceful conflict resolution in Donbas, is that the new administration would try to start with the humanitarian steps, like facilitating the free movement of people, free and secure movement of people across the line of contact, to make it possible for these people to obtain certain administrative services in Ukraine, to get their pensions, other types of social payments in Ukraine. And they also would look forward for lifting a so-called blockade, which was partly installed in 2015 and then in 2017. It means that increasing the movement of people, and this increase of movement of people will increase the communication across the line of contact, and will show people that the life in Ukraine is far better, and they are far better protected in Ukraine than in the occupied territories of Donbas. And that will undermine actually the key goal of Russia, is that to use people who live in occupied territories as a kind of leverage against Ukraine, and use these people in order to establish so-called puppet republics, make it possible for these puppet republics to become a part of Ukraine, to obtain the autonomous status, and using this autonomous status to block very important domestic and foreign policy decisions of Ukraine. And so, therefore, I think the tactic and maybe the strategy of Zelensky team is to diffuse this Russian booby trap, right, and to make it possible the long-term solution of the conflict.
So basically focusing more on a civilian, let's say, kind of solution than just purely military solution.
Yes, civilian solution and humanitarian dimension of the civilian solution, like creating the conditions to help people to reconsider their political choices and reconsider their orientations toward Russia. Because what we can see right now, Zelensky is very popular in Ukraine. The latest poll showed that he got more than 73% of approval. And I think also a lot of people in the occupied territories, they followed the Ukrainian elections, and actually they liked this kind of new leadership in Ukraine, and they hope that this kind of new leadership can bring peace to Donbas. And now in this situation it's very, very hard and complex for the Kremlin, for the Russian authorities, to impede the peace process. They need to have some very serious reason in order to stop these peace talks. However, what the Russians would try to do, and we can see that, is that they trying to impose on Ukraine its own interpretation of Steinmeier's formula and its own interpretation of political commitments of Ukraine according to the Minsk agreements. That means that Ukraine should amend constitution and include the special status into the constitution, should give the full unconditional amnesty to all fighters and illegal fighters and their leaders in these occupied territories, and to allow elections which would be held according to the rules agreed between Ukraine and the separatists. And the key goal of Russia is to force Ukraine to come into the direct negotiations between Ukraine and separatists.
And so, therefore, not having a Russian negotiation. Now, we'll focus a little bit more on the technicalities because it's a rich topic of the Steinmeier formula. But First, I want to focus once again about the Normandy negotiation, Normandy format. Earlier, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy expressed hope that Washington will become more involved in the Normandy negotiations. But the recent headlines show that there is a little bit, let's say, a bit of a turmoil. So Ukraine is at the center of a U.S. domestic political crisis that may also impact the American domestic policy and the American presidency. How do you see the outcome of this, and is it really realistic to have the U.S. taking part into that?
Actually, it's only my opinion, my judgment.
Yes, yeah.
I think that from the very beginning, the idea to bring the United States to the table of the Normandy format was not a very good idea, because taking into consideration that the current Trump administration is evaluated by external American experts, by European leaders as inept. You can just recall the latest revelations of British ambassador to United States, which was published in British press, and he called the chaotic and inept administration. And this judgment seems to be quite relevant at the time. And bringing this unstable player to the table in order to enforce your position can play against you, and that can backfire. It's hard to foresee whether bringing Trump to the table together with Putin would be in favor of Ukraine. So it was not the very good idea from the very beginning.
Be counterproductive at the end of the day.
Yes. Briefly, to state it briefly, it would be counterproductive. Right.
Now, also during a recent discussion at the Yalta European Strategy annual meeting in Kyiv, Leonid Kuchma, Ukraine's former president and now lead negotiator in the Minsk agreement, sensibly said, let's comply with the Minsk Accords, security come first, you need to pull out the troop, pull out the heavy weapons, give us back the border, and then we will hold free elections. Now the formula for peace seems clear. Unfortunately, Kuchma was not optimistic about this Normandy format. Why this, despite pushing for that, why wasn't he that optimistic when it comes to that?
Well, I would share the pessimism of former President Kuchma. And he has a good reason for this, because for the several last years he was a part of Minsk talks, and of course he was informed by Ukrainian diplomats about the negotiations between Ukraine and France and Germany. And the key part of this is that Russia has not changed nothing in its position. It's remains the same. It remained the same, that Russia demands Ukraine to accept defeat and to accept humiliating peace conditions. That would mean the special status, the elections according to the wishes of the separatists, and total unconditional amnesty. That's just not possible. That would not be acceptable neither by Ukrainian public nor by majority of Ukrainian political forces and political parties. And I think it's very hard for Zelenskyy to solve this. And of course, we've already heard that Zelenskyy team is not going to buy this kind of Kremlin persuasive messages. And therefore Kuchma was very, very pessimistic, because nothing changed. Putin doesn't change his position, and France and Germany also have not changed their position, and Ukraine hasn't changed its position. So when nobody is moving forward, then it's just impossible to talk about the possible progress in peace talks.
It's interesting that you raised the issue of France and Germany, because Angela Merkel is due to step down soon. And say there's going to be elections, there's going to be a change of people and change of leadership in Germany. Francis Macron, Emmanuel Macron in France, basically showed some sort of rapprochement with Russia at the last Brégançon speech, saying that Russia was Europe, etc., etc., etc. France and Germany really reliable partners of Ukraine when it will come to the Minsk format?
Well,
Minsk agreement, sorry.
Well, what I can see from the recent statements of German political leaders, French political leaders, is that their key message to Kremlin is that we are not going to escalate confrontation with you. We do not want to fight with you or to fight you into the corner. No, we want to talk with you and to come to a kind of compromise. This is their message. However, at the same time, these countries are members of North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and they truly share all security concerns which NATO has recently brought up to the agenda. It means the threat of Russia stationing cruise missiles and possibly cruise missiles which can bear the nuclear warheads, and thus they cannot ignore these security challenges from Russia and security risks, and that means that they would not bow to Russian pressure. What they can do is only to show that yes, they are willing to talk to Putin, but they would not tolerate the further security pressure. And this means that Ukraine can stand firmly on its position without bowing to either Russian pressure or to possible European pressure. Look, for example, at Italy. Even despite the fact that that there was recently a kind of populist government.
Well, Salvini was quite close to Russia.
Yes, but what we can see is that even in Italy, quite how to say unstable with its unstable political system, we see that majority of political class, they also understand the complexity of the situation, and they are not going to somehow to help Putin to humiliate a sovereign state and continue to violate the international law. And so 3 points. First, security risk emanating from Russia. Second, Russia disregard for international law. And third, Russia trying to impose its will on its neighbors. These all kind of elements are not acceptable for Europe. And that means that we can still rely on Europe.
Despite, and that brings me now to the Steinmeier formula, despite this idea of the Steinmeier formula, you told a little bit about this formula, but can you sum up a little bit, because it's kind of obscure for most of the viewers viewers knew the Normandy format, they knew the Minsk agreements, but this is kind of obscure for most of the viewers. How can you?
Well, the Steinmeier formula is just one piece, although very important piece of I would say peace resolution process. That means that if Steinmeier formula is implemented, that would mean that Ukraine accepts accepts the condition of special status for Donbas, and that the special status to Donbas would be granted if local elections in the territories that are currently occupied by Russian troops and separatists would be acknowledged and recognized by the monitoring mission of Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe as democratic, free and fair. But it was in 2015. Right now, Ukraine is in a more stronger position against Russia, and Ukraine will never, ever accept the special status in Donbas. Moreover, we can say that majority of citizens of Ukraine will never accept this special status. And what I can say from the public opinion polls which was conducted, which was conducted on the contact line, that even people who crossed the contact line from the occupied territories, they were polled, and 50% of them said that they won't return to the Ukraine on the pre-war conditions without any kind of special status. Only less than 20% want this kind of special status. So even people in the occupied territories doesn't make this kind of forceful condition toward peace. It's only condition which is put on the table by Russia. That would mean that Steinmeier formula could be implemented if Ukraine will be given a total control of the border, and if there would be no kind of special status, but a kind of decentralization, which currently is implemented on the sovereign territory of Ukraine.
Well, thank you very much for this overview. It was a pleasure to have you in the studio to explain a little bit between the Steinmeier formula and the evolution of the Normandy format and the Minsk agreement. That was Petro Burkovskiy, analyst at the Democratic Initiatives Foundation. Thank you for watching the program, and stay tuned for the rest.